So in today's video, I'm going to discuss what are the things which you can do after your PhD. And let us start with the most traditional and classical career choice for PhD students, which is teaching at a university or college or an institute. And essentially, this is the one job where typically the PhD is actually required in terms of the job description in many cases. So most universities would have a requirement that you have an earned PhD on the particular topic in which you are going to teach in the university. Now, there are two things to keep in mind here. One is the fact that what exactly is the topic in which you have done your PhD and what is the topic in which you have done your bachelor's degree. And this is important because many schools which are primarily focused towards teaching look at your bachelor's degree background to see if you can teach some of the typical undergraduate courses in the field. So it may be that your bachelor's degree was in mechanical and then you went ahead and did a PhD in computer science. Now in those cases, there may be some issue about getting a position in a computer science department in a typical university which is primarily focused on the UG curriculum. So again, this is something to keep in mind, and this I have seen in some of my students, that they are better off joining some multidisciplinary department or center where their skills are better used, or to join some research institution which is more multidisciplinary in focus. Now let's get back to the issue of why do you need a PhD to teach, and this used to perplex me for a long time. Because as far as I could see, teaching was quite different from research, and teaching often occurs from standard textbooks. There is a lot of material in all the subjects, and teaching typically takes place on subjects which have been taught for decades, if not for a century. For example, in the case of physics or calculus or subjects such as that. But then later I came to realize that there is a strong synergy between teaching and research, and I will explain some of these aspects to you. One of them is that teaching typically helps a researcher improve his or her fundamentals in the subject. And this is particularly important as you get more and more specialized on some topic. So let's take the instance of mechanics. You may start working on fields such as smart structures or structures where there is a combination of magnetic fields, the Newtonian aspects of mechanics, material sciences, uncertainty quantification, and so on. And at this time, when you are trying to formulate any new model, having the basics very strong is very important so that you do not make any mistake in your theoretical or computational formulation. And what I find is that people who have been teaching fundamental courses for years, such as in mechanics, strength of materials, numerical methods, and so on, will have a very good background in terms of not making mistakes in their research and also coming up with various simple problems through which they can communicate the concepts which are going on in the research field. So many times when you are doing some research on an advanced topic, you typically want to turn to very simple problems to illustrate the concept. For example, in the case of structural mechanics, you may turn to rods or beams or spring mass systems or plates to demonstrate a particular concept. And again, this makes your paper much more easy to read for a large number of people, and there is much more traction to this type of research. Now let us look at the second aspect. How would research help teaching? And this took me some time to understand. And this is typically true as the courses go to the higher level. So toward your final year of the bachelor's degree curriculum or the master's degree, the courses which are being taught today are being taught very differently from the way they were being taught 20 years ago or something like that. And that is because a lot of the content of these courses change. So for example, 20 years ago, metallic structures were very widespread, whereas nowadays composite structures have become widespread. And therefore, the subjects which were studied by a typical person 20 or 30 years ago are no longer the subjects which are being taught in school. For example, if you are teaching a course on machine learning, it's going to be very different from courses on neural networks which were taught 20 years ago or something like that. So again, if you have done a PhD and you are trained in research, then you are able to go to the literature and keep changing your knowledge or keep in tune with what is going on in the research field currently. And this does help you in taking up new research challenges and in bringing these research aspects into the courses. So again, most people think of knowledge as a static concept, and this largely comes from our concept in terms of theology or reading religious literature or something like that, where knowledge is essentially static. But if we turn to scientific world, then the knowledge is extremely dynamic. For example, if you have a lot of knowledge of vacuum tubes, that doesn't help you much as the things have moved toward transistors. If you have a lot of knowledge about Newton's laws, that does not help you when you want to apply relativistic concepts to the design of a GPS system. You may know a lot about the current computers, but that may not help you in quantum computing. You may know a lot about expert systems, but that won't help you a lot in machine learning. So again, you can see that even to teach courses in a typical current curriculum in the science and technology fields, and I would say in different fields also, what was prevalent 20 or 30 years ago is no longer prevalent today. And that is why people who have training in research have an advantage in terms of keeping up with the current literature and the current trends which are going on in the field. They can also attend conferences and read the papers which are typically published in an area. So even if they have the capability of reading review papers and some of the research monographs, they can stay current with the field. So this is what I have come to the conclusion in terms of the synergy between teaching and research. So now that's the first career choice, which is a classical career choice. But the problem is that there are not too many jobs out there in this field where there are teaching positions and research positions out there. So again, that is something to keep in mind. So again, we turn to the next career choice, which is typically in a government research lab or in a private sector research lab. So again, these kind of jobs are often there for PhDs because the knowledge system has become extremely specialized. And so there are in fact some fields, for example, in computer science, where the companies may be doing more cutting edge research than the universities because they have access to a plethora of data which they can use for running many of their simulations and algorithms. So that is certainly a job prospect you can consider at the end of the PhD, to join private sector labs of large companies or to join government labs which are there in every country. The next part of this is to look at smaller companies and startups, and this is because smaller companies and startups are often at the very, very cutting edge of a lot of research problems. So again, you will see in the pharmaceutical sector or technology sector or in various different situations, you have startups which are exploring new concepts, and so this is one more place where PhDs can look for jobs. Then the next one is think tanks, non-governmental bodies, and so on. So again, this is especially useful for people who are coming from social sciences and humanities stream, that they have a lot of knowledge in terms of broad societal aspects and so on. So again, a lot of think tanks look at some of these issues about sociology, political science, about foreign government relationships, international relationships, and so on. So again, there are many jobs out there on these systems. Then there are various organizations and foundations which strive to function for larger causes for the greater good. And again, these are also prospective sources of employment for PhDs. Then finally, I would also say there is the possibility of starting your own startup. And this is something which more and more PhD people are looking at. And this is because many times the PhD student may do a work which is extremely new, and instead of trying to convince somebody else to pursue this work or to go to an industry and fall back on some old and classical problem, they may just continue to advance this particular theme through their own startup, and they can get funding from various venture capital companies or from government sources to pursue this particular situation. The final thing I would say is also the possibility of becoming a consultant a writer, a digital media specialist, or in online teaching platforms and so on. So again, all these possibilities have become true in the current age, where through the use of internet and media technologies, you can do a plethora of different tasks, and you can take your work directly to the customer at large. So you may not need intermediation by a company to actually look at your customers, and this is something which you can consider. So again, there are a vast number of tasks, from online tutoring to consulting on some research problem to a large number of companies to writing, which are possible for a PhD students. So again, I hope I gave you a broad background of possible career paths for a PhD student. And again, it's not just teaching and research professions, but a plethora of professions which may be out there, which you can conceive of, where you can use some of the skills which you have learned through research. So one of the things the PhD students do is they master a lot of knowledge. They learn the art of writing and presentation, and they also have the capability of working on their own as well as delivering monologues. So all these particular things are extremely useful in many kind of settings. So I hope this video was useful to you, and stay tuned to my channel for more videos on such topics. Thank you very much.